Welcome, friends. We're just going to start our panel on organizing a conference. We've introduced our amazing panelists. So we have, again, from left to right, Derek DiMatteo, Karina Fuller, and Dan Johnston. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. I would like to open the floor open to what resources did you find most useful in organizing and planning the conference? So who would like to jump on that first? What were resources?
I can offer one right away. Definitely was the list of departments and programs and their administrative assistants, which I needed to distribute the calls for proposals and flyers on campus. That was a huge part for me, like gathering all of those names and the email addresses and making sure you're contacting the right person who can pass your flyer or call on to faculty and graduate student listservs is kind of time consuming, but also crucial to the success.
For me, one of the co-chairs of the first year on the Landscape Space and Place conference had been a co-chair in the previous year, and so her experience was crucial. When the previous year was the first year that she had done it, and she just got a binder of everything kind of unorganized that the previous 7 years had done, and had just kind of made do with that. And so her learning curve kind of made ours a little bit better. And so that was something that I did in the next couple of years, is make sure that I kind of set in place a lot of things that would help the people coming after me to kind of not just receive this kind of contextless binder of material, but that continuity in leadership for a conference is is really, really helpful.
Yeah, and adding on to what both Derek and Dan said, well, first I'll say, as just want to mention in my introduction, this was my first conference organizing experience here at IU, so I was very much kind of thrown into it. There were some binder-like things going on, some old templates floating around, a list of people I should contact, but I didn't really know what to do with it. And more importantly, I didn't know how to communicate to my other committee members what to do with all this information. So it was really crucial. About a couple months in, we needed to say, hey, we're all using Google Drive, right? Or we're all using Box, right? It sounds really simple, but it's something we overlooked. And since there were so many moving parts and different people to contact and numbers floating around, the biggest resource was really having a place that we all have continued access to. So if you can establish that as soon as possible, everyone's job, I think, would be a lot easier.
Yeah, building off of that, we ended up, for the Critical Ethnic Studies Symposium, we ended up using Canvas. We just set up a little Canvas site to use as a repository for files and discussions of different things that we wanted to do. So just as an alternative to Google Drive or Box. And just because of the people who happened to be involved in the organizing committee, they were kind of ended up being a little bit reluctant to use. It was predominantly faculty, right? So there were 2 graduate students on the organizing committee and then a few faculty. We were all equal members of the committee, but a lot of the technology use was driven by me and the other graduate student member. And so the faculty were a little bit reluctant to use the technology that we were advocating for, but in the end it worked out and it was a good idea.
Next question. what tactics or strategies did you employ during the conference to ensure that everything went according to plan? And did it?
Yeah, so this was another, for us at ACES, Association of Central Eurasian Students, our conference here, this was another technology thing, really just getting on a WhatsApp group. A problem with that was some people just refused to do it. They didn't want to, and I can't force you to, download an app or something, but we use that for check-ins all the time. There were probably 10 people in this group chat. I think that's a large, amount of people to have. But for example, for our conference, we were a little bit worried about low turnout at some panels. It's a legitimate fear. So to kind of combat that, we would have someone in each room when a panel started, just literally giving a warm body number. How many people are in this room? And if this room only had 4 and that room had 25, we'd send some of our own folks over to fill in some space. We did this because we had some panels we were really concerned about that needed the attention, but maybe just because they were in the same time slot as another panel, attendance didn't work out how we really wanted. So WhatsApp kept us all in the loop. The people who refused to use WhatsApp, we still got in touch with them.
Kind of just expect the unexpected. Just know that things are not going to go how you plan. And being okay with that, and just making sure, most of the people that are coming to your event don't, see all of the moving pieces behind it, and that's okay. If they come away, from the conference being, enlightened, you did your job, even if not everything happened that you wanted to happen. And also a lot of running. Sometimes, if you can, geography department is in the student building, which is next to the IMU, where our, events happen for all 3 years that I was in charge of the conference. And so being able to kind of run back to home base, when things, dramatically hit the fan, that was nice to kind of have that home base to kind of go back to that was nearby. And also, I could see a definite difference in outcomes on the years that we had a lot of, so aside from our chairs, having a committee that was helping, even if they didn't do a lot of the planning, but being there on the day, versus years that it was mostly just the organizing committee. And so having people that are even superficially willing to put in a hand on that day can make a big difference.
Yeah, and so I think that's actually something that's kind of important to realize that you have your core organizing committee, but you're going, depending on the size of that, you're going to need more volunteers on the actual day, and to plan for that. So if your conference or symposium is going to be predominantly aimed at graduate students and attended by graduate students and run by graduate students, and it's being based out of a particular program or department, then the best thing you can do is leverage the people, your cohort members and cohorts above and below you to be volunteers, to moderate panels, to escort keynote speakers to and from their lodgings. So what you want to do is you want to basically recruit beyond just the core organizing committee to distribute some of that labor and make it easier on you.
Yes, and to be very inclusive about it, we recruited undergrads in our department. And also when I was an undergraduate, I remember our yearly linguistics conference, all the undergrads did a setup and takedown, not super, crucial stuff, but you need a lot of people doing it. So that type of thing, get more people involved, and maybe the undergrads will want to attend conferences, more later on.
Coming back to this notion that things are going to go wrong and like preparing for that, thinking about contingency plans. The Critical Ethnic Studies Symposium that we just did earlier this year was in February. We had 3 keynote speakers, a reception on Wednesday, a full day of a single stream, but a full day on Thursday of presenters. So we decided we wanted a more intimate gathering. We didn't want concurrent streams of presentations. We wanted everybody to attend everything if possible. And what happened on that Thursday, we also had another day on Friday, but what happened on Thursday was that we had a pair of faculty presenters on Thursday, one of whom suddenly got the stomach flu. And so she couldn't come on Thursday. And her co-presenter discovered at the last minute that had happened and that she did not have the paper that they were presenting. So the co-presenter is there, shows up 5 minutes before the scheduled time without any materials. So there was a kind of last minute panic, what's going to happen? Will she be able to give the presentation after all? And 2 of the faculty on the organizing committee were ready to step in and give a talk on critical ethnic studies. How is it different from regular ethnic studies? What's the need for critical ethnic studies in the academy, and et cetera. We ended up not having to do that. The co-presenter managed to locate some of the video files that they wanted to show and managed to extemporaneously deliver a lot of their presentation. Looking back at it though, we shouldn't have allowed that to happen. Actually, the presentation was awful, and we should have gone with Plan B on that and had the 2 other faculty members from the core committee step in and give a talk. So I don't know. It's something to think about, I think. Having a standby presentation.
And just knowing, what are the kind of pivot points where things are going to fall apart. And so technology, is always going to fail you. And so, what do you have, in mind for when that happens? Because it's on you. And we've all presented at, conferences, and the panic that sets in when, your technology fails. And so you have to be the one with the answers. And so, make sure that there are extra laptops and extra batteries and extra, clickers, and make sure that if you're Skyping in with someone, that you have done that with the technology in the room beforehand. Also, don't Skype in people for conferences. It's not a great experience for anyone. you having to like organize it. The person presenting isn't connecting with the people in the room. The people in the room can't connect to the speaker. It's not great. And so under any circumstance, try to avoid that. We had one year that we got Yifu Tuan. I don't know if you're familiar with Yifu Tuan, but he's kind of like the grandfather of human geography. And he's like 90 years old, and so he could come, but he wanted to Skype in. It's like, okay, we'll take it. And we tried it ahead of time, and it didn't work, and so we had time to kind of correct that and make it happen. Yeah, but that was the first big polar vortex here, and like our other keynote speaker, Ann Stoller, had the pipes burst in her house, and so she couldn't come. And so she's like, well, I can Skype also. And it was a disaster. It was a horrible experience. She was like, hovering over her computer, complaining about the workmen in, the back of her house. The room was packed because people wanted to see Ann Stoller, and, but that's never a good way to give a presentation. And, so just don't do that. Though I organized a guest speaker for one of the classes that I taught, and in order to bring someone out, it costs a lot of money. And so in order to justify bringing someone in, even from like Cincinnati, I brought someone from the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. It was super cool. It really sold my class. But then on the actual event of it, all of that money that went into bringing them out here, because in order to justify all of that money, you need to do other things. I should have just had them Skype in for the class, because a class discussion is fine, but a conference, and that kind of if you don't have to go to that level, then don't. But for like, multi-session, conference symposium kind of atmosphere, avoid teleconferencing.
That's amazing. So I'm hearing a lot about like getting human resources, like having butts in the seats and having a warm body to run around like a crazy person to fix things, and always have a plan B. So these are some of the things that are going to help to answer this next question.
Well, before we move on to the next question, I have one more thing to add about making things go smoothly.
Please do.
If that's okay. And I want to share something with you as I do this. So I don't know if you can see on the screen, there's a trying to show like a schedule for this is what we used for part of the day on Friday. We used a Friday morning schedule. So we had lightning talks on Friday morning, and we were trying to figure out different possible ways to configure the timing. And what we ended up doing is we ended up with 11 lightning talks, and each person had 5 minutes. But we also wanted a lot of time for feedback after the lightning talk. So mainly the audience would be giving feedback and asking questions of the presenters after the lightning talk. In order to fit in 11 lightning talks in a morning before lunch, and they still have them be 5 minutes plus 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A, we had to really make the schedule tight. It had to be really compact. So what you'll notice when you look at this is that there's no time between the presenters, right? I don't know if this is zoomed in enough for you guys to see that. Right? There's no time between presenters. So in order to make this go as absolutely smoothly as possible, I was very clear with all of the lightning talk participants about what the schedule would be like, and I collected from them they were allotted one slide. They could use one PowerPoint slide. So I collected all of those slides in advance, had them all loaded, preloaded on the computer, so that when it was each person's turn, they would just come right up to the computer and launch their file. And when they were done, the next person could just come right up and launch their file without having to like log in and do any of that nonsense, because everything was already logged in. Does that make sense? So just realizing, thinking through, a lot of what you need to do to make a symposium or conference or anything run smoothly is anticipation, right? And so this was simply, really came down to an exercise in anticipation, like thinking through, okay, what's one of the bottlenecks of any conference, that moment of change when you're changing presenters, and oh, I can't get the login, or my file's not there, or whatever, right? And so trying to obviate any of that, right, mitigate those pitfalls as much as possible. Is something that we did.
That's amazing, particularly if you've got those slides from the get-go, then you can save them for like posterity's sake or for future reasons. So if you've got like a repository, like a box that is open to your participants, those individuals will be able to get those resources and see them later to help remember the different presentations they went to. I think that's an exceptional idea. So again, that kind of goes into the next question, which are, what are recommendations that you would give that helped your conference to go smoothly, or that you wished you had known beforehand? Kind of like the shoulda, coulda, woulda question.
So I have a lighthearted anecdote for that. We were printing our programs, and schedules change. Presenters say they can't show up literally the day of, right? But you have to print your programs at least a couple days before your actual conference. So cool, we sent them off to the printer. They're getting printed. Someone writes in our group chat, "Hey everybody, everything's fine, but," and we're like, "Oh no, you spelled an important person's name wrong again," because it happened. And like, "Oh, we fixed that." But no, actually, our conference booklets, they should have been white with like our logo on it, but they were pink. They were printed on pink paper somehow. And we were just like, okay, well, we don't have time to reprint those again. Wouldn't it have been great to just print one first, or like get a test first? So it sounds really obvious, but I think just we were really rolling, trying to get things going. If you're going to print anything official, especially your programs that you're printing in mass, please print one first. Get it tested by whoever's printing your material.
Fun adjunct side note, I totally have one of those programs, and it looked awesome. Like, it stood out. Like, you knew what that program was for, because there's nothing else like it in this world. It was like Pepto-Bismol pink. It was amazing. It was so good.
I might say the timing, like what the date you choose for your event, right? There's so much going on our campus, like an insane number of events on our campus. I think it's really, I didn't understand initially how important it was to think about competing events and how that can affect your audience, and especially if those events are the same day, or like the following weekend. And I ran into a situation where some of the people that we were reaching out to speak on Thursday, not as keynotes, but as faculty presenters, were already committed to another event that was like either the same day or the next weekend. And they're like, "Sorry, I'm already doing something." You're like, "Oh." Which, if we had like thought to check for that sort of thing, would have helped, been really helpful. Or did you have a question?
Yeah, so that's my question. So like, how can we handle before this happens? So, like, let's say they should register. Sorry, for some reason I don't know. So I need to understand this question. So like, so we register our event before, like, and then how long there is ideal time to like prepare a conference? That's the first question. And second, so we like register our event instead like register our department. Let's say like our event, like we plan to make an event in, let's say in SGIS. So we should register to SGIS so that like there's one center for information that like everyone should know like what kind of event that's going on. Let's say in the next couple two months, so like we can handle that situation. So that's my question. We need to find out or like
So, like, who's your audience? And that's one thing, in the very beginning when you're like conceptualizing, like, who are you trying to get? Are you mostly trying to get people from IU? Are you trying to get people from all over? Are you including the community? And that, like, once you define your audience, that is going to help you kind of know where you need to advertise and what kind of head time you need. I mean, there's a lot of things that you kind of, get in departmental emails that are like happening that week as like, oh, I can do that. And so like, that kind of lead time, kind of helps. But if you're trying to, hit a broader audience, it takes forever to get onto the IU calendar. Like the IU calendar of events, it takes a long time to like make that happen. And so you're going to also need to have like the venue, booked and your hours like really well defined, far ahead of time so that you can, put in that to get on the IU calendar. Like actual flyering and things around campus and around town, if you're doing that. I would say at least a month, if not, like the beginning of a semester is, because like, if you're advertising something in March and you're, trying to get people to come, in December, people aren't thinking about that. And so thinking about, not just like what other events are happening on that day, but, where people's minds are in, reference to the school timeline.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. And I think part of your question also was how far in advance. So ideally, you're going to be planning 8 to 12 months out, right? So before the event, 8 to 12 months, you need to be already working on things. So if you do that, what the benefit of that is that you're seeing what other events are happening already at that time. Right, so we want our event to do next year in March. Okay, March just ended, so you know what other campus events happened in March, which was the busiest weekend, which was the least busy weekend, which of those events are annual events, right? So you can predict if it's an annual event, it's going to happen within a week of when it happened the year before, right? So this is obviously something that. For the conference I was involved in, the Critical Ethnic Studies Symposium, this was something that was new on campus, right? So we had the luxury of being able to choose when we wanted to, we didn't have it wasn't an annual event that had been established for 10 years and everyone was expecting to happen the same time every year, right? We were able to move the date around. 3 years ago is when it first started, and it was in late March. Last year, we moved it to early March. This year, we moved it to early February because each time we were trying to change the date so that we could get a better audience and avoid other events that were competing for the same audience. Right? So, I mean, that was a luxury maybe that we had that certain other events might not have, but it was something that that was important to us, and starting that far ahead of time made it possible to book the spaces that we wanted, and to really get the speakers that we wanted for keynote and things like that. So that was pretty important.
Just on the keynote speaker note or invited speaker note, as you all probably know, they need a lot of time, like a year, oftentimes, depending on who you're looking at. But I think in our case, it was a year. This guy needed that much warning. So we had the luxury of having kind of a flexible date. So we gave our speaker a list of dates, and he said, okay, these two are fine. Like, this one has a big football game. Okay, let's do this one. And we were able to settle it that way. But that's another thing to take into consideration. These big IU events that have nothing to do with your field will book up the hotel rooms. So if you're having people come in from all over and they need a place to stay, as kind of happened with our event, they might not be in the best hotels because there are just so many things going on in Bloomington that day. So check the IU calendar, check City of Bloomington as well.
Thank you for hitting the point that I was totally gonna be like, and also, yeah, nailed it.
Very cool.
I just wanted to make a comment if I could. So in terms of, that's really important to check the schedule in advance because we're doing one like year in advance, but check it more than once. Because we checked it at the beginning and then like someone else like had a question come up and we looked and like the IU calendar got switched so that we had to change our date and like move it up. So just like check for sure, but just maybe check every once in a while to see in case someone else can.
Thank you.
Yes, things happen, hence the plan B. That's amazing. Other questions? This is fantastic. Yeah.
So hold on. So one thing, with like planning ahead and, kind of going back to, resources, like running the conference is a great resource because like at the end of the conference, you've just learned so much about conference planning.
Yay!
And conference running. And so, but right after the conference, you're also totally burned out and you've neglected all of the other things in your life. And so it's like, I need to like not do my conference right now. And so, like definitely take care of yourself and take care of your other responsibilities, but come back to it soon just to like get down, in writing things that you learned that are going to help it run better next time. If you're not involved, it's going to help that next person. If you are involved, it's going to, and so, in planning out, well ahead of time, learn from yourself, and then help the people coming after you by kind of putting that down words as soon after you can. And I think that could have gone things settings did it, but seek feedback from your participants also. Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, get feedback, from people on, what did you like? What did, could have gone better? So that you can either use that or pass it on to the next person.
That's amazing. Having some form of institutional memory for the next round of the conference is essential because not only are you helping yourself coming like out of this conference experience, but you're also helping the next group of people that might be taking this test on. So it really benefits both you and the next round of the conference to have that kind of institutional memory. Also, I would recommend, sorry, as a moderator, I'm totally jumping in, have a meeting with all the people that organized it in the first place immediately following the conference and kind of go through everything yourselves, like, hey, what went really well? Kind of like the questions that we've been asking these individuals, like, what did you find most useful? What went really well? What could have gone better? What do I wish would have known? What do I wish I would have known prior or during? Because those kinds of answering those questions right after the conference is over is giving you more of that institutional memory that you'll have going into the next one. And that's really useful. Other questions? We had
So I was wondering about the finances. So I was wondering what were your costs, and then what was donated, whether people's time, food, whatnot, and what you actually paid
So I actually believe we've got a document that is available to all of you. If you sign the attendance sheet, there's an extra column on this attendance sheet that asks if you would like to be added to Box. What I mean by that is there is a Box resource of this panel discussion where our amazing panelists have given us some of their resources that they use themselves to put on their panels or their conferences. So you can have access to this folder. I will gladly add you to the grad group Box folder so that you can access these materials in the future. And I believe Karina would like to answer this question.
Yes, I mean, I'll just speak from recent memory. One of my hats for our conference was fundraising organizer, so I had a whole lot of fun doing that type of thing. Actually, one of our organizing committee members put together this really nice Excel workbook that let us put everything together. I'll demo it for you here, but just to give her due credit, her name is Jennifer Dubiansky. She's a PhD student in my department, Central Eurasian Studies. So yes, please feel free to use this. I'll show you kind of the different features it has. We were a smaller conference. We had 38 panelists. We had 11 sponsors, all IU campus sponsors. We didn't seek external funding, but there was still a lot to process, internally. So, oh no worries. Are you looking for IU type of funding or external or?
I was thinking more external, because I'm thinking if you don't do this as a grad student, as a part of your institution, or even as a faculty member of your institution.
Well, unfortunately, I can't speak to that, but I'm sure my other panelists can. But I still will show the different funding breakdowns that we had that did prove pretty useful. But do you have any experience with external?
So for the Landscape Space and Place Conference, the chair of the department that got like $5,000 from the college for this conference. And that's one thing, like with funding, that you have to be aware of, like any strings attached to it. Like we could not use that for anything outside of like renting the space and materials and honorarium. And so if we wanted any kind of hospitality, we had to get other funding sources for that. We couldn't take the keynote out to dinner with that. We couldn't host a party with that money. So that was limiting. And so when we did, a hospitality event, just had, people, local folks bring potluck, to that. And so, if you are seeking funding either from, other institutes or departments on campus or external, always be really clear about what strings are attached to it.
So
that's what I'll add. Yeah.
one of the handouts that's in the box folder is titled "On Sources of Funding," and it's a kind of compilation of different resources. Student organization funding, collaborating with academic and program units, some places that you can go to look for partners, support. There are different institutes on campus, like CAHI, Arts and Humanities Council. The Office of the Vice Provost for Research is a really good place to go and ask if they have ideas for funding that are external. There's this list here. I have a link to it. You probably can't see it too well, but that has a whole bunch of internal and external funding sources, including grants and things like that you can apply for. And
Just a really quick plug there,
Yeah.
if you could scroll back up. For IAS, the Institute for Advanced Study. Funny story, we will be hosting a second panel discussion next week with them as our co-sponsors. If you're interested in that panel, it's post-fieldwork researcher burnout. So if you're experiencing burnout and you need this panel, please grab a flyer on your way out. Okay, sorry for the plug. Go
Yeah,
on.
no worries. So IAS can be a source of funding. IU Grad Grant Center has the database that you can also use to find funding for meetings or conferences or seminars. Several years ago, the Department of English Graduate Student Organization decided that we wanted to give our faculty an honorarium, but we were forbidden from using our funds to give faculty, IU faculty, an honorarium. So what we did is that we decided to ask local restaurants to give us gift certificates, to donate gift certificates, and we gave those gift certificates as honoraria to IU faculty who served as moderators on our at our conference. And so that was, an interesting thing. I think we did that for 3 years and then stopped. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Above, it mentioned that there's a difference between conference and a symposium,
Mm-hmm.
and that the conference usually has like the ticket fees, sales or entrance fees. Would you say that that is also a way that you require funding?
It could be. At IU, I have not done that, and I found out about this distinction because I carelessly use the word conference, and I was trying to book space at the university club, and I said, "Oh, we're doing this conference," and that opened up like a whole series of questions came at me that I wasn't expecting, and I was like, "What? No, we're not doing any of that stuff." Like we said, like the rate was completely different that they were going to charge us to use the space, and I was like, "Okay, no." So it's, I guess the right word to use is symposium. Yeah, so and that really matters. It matters for like IU catering and meeting support services. It matters for like in ways that we weren't expecting, and that I didn't really want to go down that route. I don't know if you guys had some experiences with that.
So our conference, we called it a conference. It was called a conference before I started, and so that's not on my hands. But we, it was started as a graduate student conference, and eventually we grew it to just being open to everyone. But it was very, very important to us that it remain free, because cost of conferences is a barrier to getting people involved in a conference. One person is like, what if you charge $5, as a conference fee? It's like, that's fine. And, and if you have, 30 people, all of a sudden you have, enough money to get coffee, for folks. And so that's something that, we, had a, debate about, do we charge $5, or do we advertise like, this is a free conference, please just come work here for, the academics of it. We did end up going to like the national, like not National Geographic, but the American Association of Geographers, the specialty group that kind of dealt with the subject matter that we covered. Even though it was an interdisciplinary conference, they were like, we see this as a value add, conference to our organization and our mission, and so we will give you money that way. So professional organizations, even national organizations, are willing to, kind of pitch money your way if you just like list them as, co-sponsor, to kind of get their name out
And for funding, like a lot of these funding resources, like mentioned previously, will have stipulations on how you're able to use them. So one of the funding sources that we got for the Literacy, Culture, and Language Education Conference in the School of Education stipulated that we were not allowed to take money from students. So students had to have free entrance into this conference, which I was all for. I think that's amazing. But that was one of the stipulations of a type of funding that we applied for and received. And additionally, there are resources if you're doing a conference, and ours was a conference, just to throw that out there, it was 275 people internationally. And there is a resource on campus called IU Conference, is that right? The IU Conference people, that will help you put on the conference. They're professionals, they are experts, and they will help you to make it successful. Our conference would have done so much worse if it hadn't been for those amazing humans. They did a lot of work to keep us above our black line of funding and to do good things for the conference. So just a real quick plug on that. Awesome. Ready for one last question? I'm going to trick you guys with it. What are potential first steps when conference planning that maybe haven't been mentioned yet? Oh, we never got to the Excel spreadsheet. Did you want to show that first? Let's show the
Sure.
Excel first, and then we'll jump on that question.
Okay, so yes, this is a really simple looking spreadsheet, right? But this is only the first page. And this is the number that everyone wants to see. Like, unless you're the fundraising organizer or the treasurer at the meetings, people usually don't care exactly what funding sources you're having. So here we're showing like income, which is less than our total expenses. So yeah, we need to fundraise some more money. Our great Jenny at Seuss, she put this together so that we have a breakdown of all of our expenses here. So we had people specifically working on the keynote, and I barely talked to them the whole conference planning time. I only was hounding them for prices, like how much does everything cost? So these changed all the time. It was really, really nice to finally have a place where they could update the price, or they could email me and I would update it personally. But basically, she engineered it in some magical way where, you know, maybe we budgeted too little or whatever, we didn't get enough money for it. All of these are kind of interactive, so it will show us, you know, what we actually need to do here. So yeah, here's a breakdown. Again, the biggest prices were food for us. Always the darn food. And I'll get to that. We have a whole page just for food. But what was really helpful here was looking at these restrictions. So I have here like a kind of a dummy sponsor, nice sponsor number one. A lot of our centers were Title VI centers saying you can have 500 of our dollars, but none of them can be used for hospitality, so no food. And that was our biggest expense. So we just, block things off here. So if this nice sponsor here, gave us 500, we said, okay, well, programs aren't hospitality, let's put 120 there. And we could really see how the funds were allocated in this way because we had 11 sponsors, right? And a lot of different stipulations for all of them. So you can interact with this. Like if I say they gave us 50 here, we can see a number change down underneath. That'll update over here. It'll update on our quick view as well. So she linked it all really nicely. I don't know how Excel works. This was something that was my job, that was the most important for me. When you're collecting all this funding information, there are a lot of people you need to talk to. So you have, their names, the amount they pledged, who you contacted, their information, but then also the financial contact, who is the person you're talking to way more, and then the restrictions, and then some notes. And this was very, very full. Before we had this spreadsheet, I had kind of like a Word document attached to it. It got really confusing when you're dealing with lots of different money and everyone wants their money used in this certain way. So yes, please utilize this or something like it. If you're a student organization, one of the best things that we had on our side was the IU Funding Board. They gave us a good chunk of our money. I don't know if anyone here represents a student organization, but if you do, please look into IU Funding Board. What they do require is a full budget, so you need to have your budget up and ready to go. You apply for like a presentation with them if you're requesting more than $1,000, which we were. So we had 3 people designated to go and pitch our conference, tell them, kind of abstracts we've received, potential turnout, here's our budget. You also need to tell them about money that you've already received. And then I don't know what they do, but they give you some money and you just kind of say, thank you. Yeah. Okay, so it really worked out for us. Again, student organizations, we sometimes have trouble getting these funds. So food was the most annoying of them all. I think we got way more food than we actually needed. We had food for 2 days after the conference. But we wanted to make sure people were fed. And critically in our conference, and maybe it's actually a symposium now, because it was entirely free to attend, people didn't even register, only the presenters and discussants, and we said there's food. So we estimated, okay, maybe if we get like portions for 80, it'll be okay. We were very lucky, it worked out just fine. But really, breaking down these food costs was super helpful. We can see next year, like, this was a lot to spend for dinner. Why are we, like, $16 per plate for 80 people? We can look to easily cut this off. Before we had decided on our breakfast option, which was Bloomington Bagel Company, we were considering IMU catering because yeah, right? It's convenient. They'll give us a nice breakfast, but their total price was around $1,000 for breakfast. For breakfast, yes. So easily shaved off, $500 there, and you can go lower if you go Kroger. So, yes.
They sound like a silly question, but was that like a continental, intercontinental
The
breakfast?
IMU catering, yeah, they had a full eggs and these types of things. So
You wonder what they're like at,
But even still, I wonder, like we had a really nice lunch from Samira, full buffet for $1,000 exactly. Breakfast, our conference, like the first panel was at 9, people started registering at 8, not everyone's gonna be there. So we thought, let's really save on this breakfast. And we had bagels for days also, so save on breakfast. But yeah, this is oriented in such a way that you have to update number of people first, and then it will give you, and then I think you have to do price per plate. Let me check. I haven't done this in a while. Let's just do.
Yeah, you can, that's what you
Okay.
update, you can change what it is.
Okay. Yeah, let's just do 8 and see it'll change like massively down
Fancy.
here. Yeah, it's really fancy stuff, and like I said, everything will be updated up over here, so you can give people that quick view. So this is the kind of information you're going to need to keep all together, and so everyone actually can see it, because prices will change probably like even in the last week.
Another thing just about funding is when you're requesting funding from different units or programs or grants or anything like that, you need to be really careful about when the funds will be made available to you, when the funding will be dispersed. So for ours, we applied for grants, and because we didn't know if we would get the grants, we found that we weren't able to make any decisions about like how many keynote speakers can we afford to fly here, right? Like, so that was something that ended up delaying certain very important decisions, which, if we had been a little bit more careful about when we applied for funding and when the decisions were going to be made, and we could have avoided a few headaches.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I don't know if we want to exit the funding part, but that ties into the first steps, like establishing a timeline first, but then realizing, sadly, it all has to do with money. Like, there's only so much you can do if you're not sure how much money you have. So for me as the fundraiser, it was a little bit frustrating at first, because the prices kept changing and none of our stuff was put together. So I'm like, do I need to like keep going? Do I need to stop? Because there are apparently some problems if you over fundraise. A lot of people don't like that. So you have to ensure them, like show, your sponsors your budget if they ask for it, or you can just present it to them. But also crucially not going over, not fundraising too much. So you're not suspected of the E word in embezzlement or whatever. So,
And then, that also goes into like what venue you can do. When I was bringing that speaker onto campus, it's like, oh, I have money, that's great. Now that I know that I have money, let me actually schedule the thing. And then, all of these venues is like, okay, it's gonna, cost you, a couple hundred just for the venue. It's like, oh, that, screws up my budget entirely. And so, like the IMU does like have different rates for like campus units, but you have to talk to someone because like what they quote on their website is for everyone else. Booking classroom space is, it's not really swanky, conference space, but it works and it's free.
yeah.
The Social Science Research Commons, the SSRC in Woodburn, is a really cool conference venue, but it's also a really awkward space to like present in. But it's free and you can bring in outside catering. Where if you do it in the IMU, you have to, like the space is free, but you pay for, setting up chairs sometimes, and but you are restricted to only IMU catering. And so, it's all of those, moving pieces.
And I would say your department or school as well, because I know in school of education, there is a vendor list. You cannot buy food from Sam's Club, there is
Also, just I use partnership with
Coca-Cola.
I already got it.
Yeah.
So
This
the water
is
you get has to be
Kroger
like
beverage.
Dasani, and like.
This is contraband.
It's fine. This isn't a conference, it's a panel, way cooler. Other first steps that you kind of remember, like, if you have any questions beyond what we're able to cover in the panel, by the way, we will have time at the end, and I'm sure my colleagues would be happy to pass on their information. And I also would be happy to pass on any information that I have about conference planning and my experiences. But yeah.
I think I just really want to plug what my other hat was for conference planning. It was the book display, academic book display hat. First off, I didn't know what a book display was really when I first joined the committee. It was kind of assigned to me to do. But the people in the May before I joined had said, these are the events that we want to do. These are the amenities that we want to have. So with that in mind, we were able to try to like shape a budget. So it was good that we knew we wanted a book display from the beginning. So that way in September when like the new people came in, we could set them on their tasks. And yeah, the academic book display was awesome. That's another thing that if you're looking for outside publishers, not IU units, you need like 6 months to a year in advance to tell these publishers. I can speak more to that if anyone's interested, but the book display was way more fun than fundraising.
Two kind of first steps. Make sure that your roles are clearly defined. Not, among co-organizers, among committee, members that are working with you, on the day of, like, make sure that your roles are very, very clearly defined and everyone knows who's in charge of who. Because, so I, created a dedicated email address so that we weren't all, and so it could, kind of collect information in the Google Drive and things like that. And I made it available for everyone to use, but I ended up being the only person that did all of the correspondence.
Yeah.
And so eventually, like when it, came closer to time and like there was a heavy load of correspondence, I was like, anyone can answer these emails. It's not just me, but it was just me. Because I had kind of put myself into that role. And so make sure that it's very, very clear. It's like, okay, this is my role, and so don't assign me other things. And then I had a second thing that, left my head once I started talking.
Well, if you continue thinking about it for a second, in addition to that role situation, like, oh shoot, well, I did the same thing. Huh.
One thing that you should think about is conference lifestyle and your organizing committee, like as we've just been saying, forming your committee, but having mechanisms to establish what milestones you need to hit, right? So working backwards from the date of the actual event and saying, okay, but working backwards from that date, you need to have this done by this date, right? This milestone has to be done here. This milestone has to be done here. What are the things that are required to hit those milestones, right? What do we need to accomplish before we can say that milestone has been checked off of our list? So working backwards from the date that you're trying to hit is really important. So one, you can use a variety of resources for that. Like project management software can be really useful. So like the university provides us with Microsoft Project, which you could use like you could create a Gantt chart in Microsoft Excel, or you could use an online app like Kanban Flow. Like some of you,
Gantt Pro.
Yeah, Gantt Pro. Or if you're using one of those for like your dissertating, adapt it for a conference. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of software. Monday, I think, is another one. But those, like that idea of like setting milestones for when things need to be accomplished, and identifying who's responsible for those milestones is really important. And then keeping on them, like regularly checking in, like, to see if people are making progress towards those goals.
Try to make sure you don't have overlapping work. That was the point with the having distinct roles. You don't want to be doing the same thing as participant X, Y, Z. Like if you're doing the same work, that's doubling down on the same thing. It doesn't benefit anyone. So make sure you're all doing separate, different things. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean that's really important, right? So some of the things to reiterate that we had mentioned before, right? So determining the date of your conference, working backward from that to set milestones, right? But also not only what's your topic, right? But who's your audience? Making sure that you have a defined audience so that you know who you're trying to reach, how to advertise to them, making sure that you've decided what the purpose of your event is, and the purpose helps you determine what the format of your event should be, right? Whether you want to do a conference, a symposium, a workshop, a panel, like this, right? There's like a whole bunch of decisions you need to make ahead of time, right? So concurrent sessions versus single streams, how long do those sessions need to be? Papers, single papers versus panels. Are you going to have poster sessions? Are you going to have discussion sessions or roundtables? Do you need to have discussants or moderators for any of this? All of that, I think, are questions you want to.
Yeah, so define your roles, then also defining the role of and the character and nature of the event. Because like we're really good at thinking through like paper sessions. We've done that, but the other kind of organizing that needs to happen around this event is something that might not come naturally, and so like it's a social event, not just an academic event, and so critical ethnic studies had dance parties and performances associated with it. That is really cool, and that is part of like the character and nature of that event. But and so it's important to understand like, is that who you are? And so that's going to help you, look outside of like the actual, like people talking about their academics. And so understanding the nature and character of the events.
And the space that it goes in too. Because if you've got like dance as a component, but the room is set up like this,
that's gonna be a rough space to try and fit a dance situation into. Or for poster presentations, if you've got poster presentations, where are these gonna be set up? Do you have easels? Do you have the cardboard that goes on the easels to keep the posters? Because a lot of times people will come with very flimsy photo paper posters. So do you have the means to strap those up? Are they gonna be in a hallway? Will that inhibit accessibility? Like, these are things that you never think you'll run into until you run into them on accident and people hate you for them and then you feel terrible. So don't make the same mistakes as me. Accessibility is a serious thing. Yay. Questions? I'm gonna go ahead and keep it live feed because I think we've tapped out. Is that, am I cool?
Yeah.
We're good. Thank you so much, friends. This was wonderful.